A very special guest,
Mr. Shachindra Nath,
the Vice Chairman and the MD of U Gro Capital, has joined us today. A data tech lending platform, U Gro Capital is solving the problem of lending in small and micro enterprises in India. Join us in this thought-provoking discussion where he walks us through his journey of being in this industry.
Thank you so much, sir, for doing this. To begin with, in India, MSME contributes a lot to the GDP. I think the number is around 30% to the entire contribution. So how do you see MSME as a space, since you grow primarily caters to that particular space?
Yes, you're right. If you look at reported number, actually, my gut feel is that actually MSME contribution to the GDP is much higher than what is reported. But more importantly, I think it's not just the GDP contribution. The social fabric of our country is balanced because of MSMEs.
Right.
Because as Indians, we come from small cities and town, and one of the primary thing which has to be taken care of is people's employment.
Right.
And MSME is the largest employment generator
Right.
in our country.
Correct.
You can't build large factories and industries in every small city and town.
Correct.
And it is the small businesses which is providing that employment. MSME, to a large extent, for a number of decades, have been a neglected sector.
Right.
And it is only in last 10 years or so, we are seeing that real potential of MSMEs and the importance is being given to them.
Right.
With the advent of the entire data, digital infrastructure, and more importance given to Bharat, actually you will see the real potential of MSME would come
Right.
to the forefront in India.
So is there a good government push towards MSME, and government is trying very hard कि MSME का जो contribution है वो दिखने लग जाए और वो थोड़ा और increase हो?
देखिए यस, मैं हमेशा एग्जैक्ट कोविड में अगर आप देखेंगे, एंड इफ यू लुक एट व्हाट हैपेंड इन यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स ऑफ अमेरिका, इन अदर मैच्योर इकोनॉमीज, एंड व्हाट हैपेंड इन इंडिया, every scheme of the government and the support, whether it was through emergency credit line, whether it is liquidity, everything was provided to only MSME.
Right.
That tells you that for governments, and I keep saying left, right, or center, it doesn't matter which form of the government we have,
Right.
MSMEs have gained importance in the eyes of the government. And it is natural because, if nothing else, look at if there are 15 crore people employed in MSME,
Correct.
that is roughly around 20 to 23 crore of voting population
Right.
of this country.
Right.
So how can any government neglect this?
Neglected. Right.
Yeah. So I think from all perspective, the MSME from a policy perspective is one of the most important sector.
Right.
Now if you read commentary, whether it is RBI, whether it is government, everywhere everyone is talking about MSME and how they can
Right.
be supported.
Right.
So I have no doubt in my mind that next 2 decades, what we call the Amit Call, actually a lot will happen around small
So the
business.
growth story of India will be backed by MSME
Small business,
completely.
small
What makes
businesses.
And sir, MSME में कच्चे का business बहुत होता है. This is what the persona people have carried. Is it true? And if it is the case, are we moving towards more formalizing
Yes,
things?
of course. So one of the reasons why U Gro is a relative success story is because of this change.
Okay.
The problem of credit to MSME was a problem of what we call the kacha business.
Okay.
Lending में 3 चीज चाहिए होती है: the intent of the customer, his eligibility, and his ability to repay.
Right.
For lending institution to assess the ability to repay for a business which was largely in cash was too difficult.
Right.
So two things which actually, if you go to talk to a small business, which they would not be very happy about. When demonetization happened first time, the small businesses and generally public has this perception that उनका cash लिया जा सकता
लिया जा
है.
रहा है. Right.
So वो एक बड़ा psychological barrier
Barrier आ
है.
जाता है.
उसके बाद when GST came and the implementation of GST forcing small businesses to be more formal, and third, when COVID happened, the space of digitization in terms of the payment and recognition, all of that is actually making small businesses extremely formal.
Right.
We are, I think so, at a 20 to 30% adoption rate when it
Okay.
comes to formalization.
Okay.
When it would reach to 50%, I think so MSMEs in India would explode in
Right.
terms of their growth.
Businesses भी comfortable है ये shift से, या फिर it's something that is being forced upon them and that is why they're doing it? What is your take on that?
See, देखिए, if you think of it this way, if a small business was doing a turnover of 1 crore,
Right.
and margin is 10%, you're making 10 lakh rupees.
Right.
If you save the entire 30% tax, your margin is 40 lakh rupees.
Right.
And if you tell the same business that the next year you don't have the 40% margin, but you have only 10% margin.
Right.
On the shorter period of time, nobody would like it.
Correct.
Because सबको लगेगा कि उनका 30 रुपए तो निकाल लिया गया उनके पास.
बिल्कुल.
But what we keep saying and what we are experiencing and what I think so gradually business are realizing that earlier you were doing 1 crore of turnover, but you had zero credit available.
Right.
So your total margin was only 10 lakh rupees and you were suffering
Right.
from this worry about this informal or cash economy.
Right.
Now, if this 1 crore turnover is in formal economy,
Right.
you will be able to avail a 50 lakh rupees or 1 crore of
Right.
loan,
Right.
which means that your turnover would go up from 1 crore to 2 crore
Right.
or 3 crore,
Right.
which means your formal income would go up from 10% to 30%.
Right. Makes sense.
So you actually come back to the same without the hassle of being into the cash economy.
Plus your business grows.
Yeah, that's your business
Exactly.
grows. Yes.
And I think वो interest भी जब मिलता है तो income statement पे भी you are able to get the benefit
that's
of taxation.
that's the whole
Right.
that's the whole purpose. So
Right.
we're saying, believe even if your income remaining the same, the expansion at least taking away the headache of being into this
और
this
longevity business का automatically
Yes,
बढ़ जाता
of
है. That makes a lot of sense. So we spoke about MSME as a space. Now there's this entire question of lending into MSMEs. You know, it's been a challenge before and now it is getting better. What are the changes that are happening at the ground level in the entire MSME lending space, since you are, looking closely at it?
So I think the biggest challenge was this. So in 2018, when we were starting U Grow, I always get used to intrigued about this fact कि हिंदुस्तान के का सबसे अंडर पेनिट्रेटेड क्रेडिट सेगमेंट में बड़ा फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशन क्यों
Right.
नहीं है, राइट? बिकॉज there are consumer financing में you have large institutions like Bajaj,
Right.
second hand truck finance में Shriram
Right.
Finance, then you have Mahindra. So for every segment of the market you have
There's
some or
something.
other large,
Right.
I'm not talking about bank, even large NBFCs are
Right.
there. But when it comes to MSME, you can't even say one name, right?
Exactly.
Saying ये बड़ा institution है जो MSME को finance करता है. The problem remained the same, as I
Right.
said. The ability of formal lending institution to assess the repayment capability of MSME was a challenge.
Okay.
And as the adoption of GST, the digitization, that would shift. So
Right.
this decade or next 2 decades, whatever you have seen in consumer financing business, what you will see now back into the MSME financing
Right.
business. I give this example that my dad was a Ford scholar. He was a professor in BHU. I remember when first time he was buying a scooter, which was a Priya scooter.
Right.
It came after a wait of 7 years.
Oh.
Right? So you have to
Okay.
book a scooter and it used to
Right.
come in 5, 6, 7 years, right? And to buy that scooter, he started saving money at the time of the booking itself.
Oh.
So when it got delivered, he had a recurring FD which matured, and
And then
from
he
that,
paid. Okay.
Now at your age, do you ever think of this?
Not
That
really.
if you have to buy something,
the
a
maximum
fridge,
I think is 7 days.
yeah, because you can walk into a store and if you have a mobile number and a credit card, you can buy whatever you feel like, right? So this transformation has happened in consumer financing industry.
Right.
Why this has happened? This happened because prior to 2008, there was no concept of a bureau, right?
Right.
Today, if you talk to an Uber and Ola driver and say what is your bureau score, he would probably know,
Right.
because he knows कि 700 का score मतलब मेरे को पैसा मिल जाएगा.
Okay.
So this maturity of the bureau and some of the large institutions being able to rely upon that and started giving on tap credit is something which you'll see happening in this decade.
Right.
So हम हमेशा बोलते हैं कि किसी आज एक छोटे बिजनेस को एक 10 लाख का ऑर्डर मिले
Hmm.
और उसके लिए उसको 6 लाख रुपए चाहिए
Hmm.
टू फुलफिल दैट ऑर्डर, और ऑर्डर फुलफिल करने का टाइम अगर 60 डेज है, उसको वो 6 लाख रुपए का क्रेडिट 60 दिन में नहीं मिलता है.
Right.
But you will see that in probably next year or year and a half, for every order which a small business would get, on the basis of the order itself, he will start getting money.
Okay.
So that is the transformation. So it would be like walking into a Chroma store and buying a TV or
Right.
electronic
It
goods.
would be that easy.
Yeah, it would start happening for MSME.
Right. What is the demand supply gap? Like, if you can put some numbers towards in the lending space towards MSME, what is the demand supply gap that we can look
आप
at?
calculate भी नहीं कर सकते. So in fact, so it's very odd. In our last quarterly presentation, we presented this number. In 2017, on a reported data basis, we had 55 trillion rupees of credit gap for MSME.
Okay.
And from 2017, India has seen 12 new small finance bank, roughly around 50 plus new NBFCs. Every large institution, public sector bank, private sector bank, said that we will now expand into MSME. Post-COVID, it has become even larger.
Right.
So what should be the result of this? This 55 trillion should have come down.
Right.
It has gone up to 86 trillion
Oh,
rupees.
okay.
Right.
So the
So it is,
demand is increasing.
yeah,
and
the gap is increasing.
Gap is increasing.
Gap is increasing. And why it is happening? It is happening because the net contribution or the growth of MSME as a business is increasing
Right.
versus credit remaining so at an average of 15% growth.
Right.
So this gap is not getting fulfilled at
Okay.
all, right?
Okay.
So so there is a lot of talk about consumer financing, personal loan, app based loan,
Right.
fintech loan, but ye MSME को on tap cash flow based lending
Hmm.
is still have been a challenge.
Right.
But I think the last 5-7 years there has been transformational changes which is
Right.
happening in industry.
Right.
So there's a lot of talk about OCEN, there's a lot of talk about cash flow based lending, and a lot of people read about it in newspaper, media, and think this is something alien.
Right.
But no, it's actually happening.
Okay. Sir, इसमें banks enter नहीं करेंगे as this space, banks start seeing that, there is formalization happening here. So will that not be a challenge for an NBFC that given a bank comes in and
बिल्कुल
starts?
होना चाहिए, करेंगे ही करेंगे
Okay.
सर. लेकिन देखिए आपको एक छोटा मैथ देता हूँ. 86 ट्रिलियन रुपीस का क्रेडिट गैप फुलफिल करने के लिए regulators require any lending institution to be providing average capital base of around 15%, right? So 15% itself is so much capital required to fund the full gap.
Right.
So हिंदुस्तान के सारे बैंक, सारी NBFC और करीब 25-50 नई NBFC मिलके भी सिर्फ MSME को भी लेंड करे ना, तो आई थिंक सो हमारी लाइफ
बहुत बड़ा ब्लू ओशन है जिसमें सब कंट्रीब्यूट कर सकते हैं.
That is point one. Second, I think so there is, I keep giving this example that by that logic, why it is that all the banks end up acquiring microfinance company, right? Because ultimately it's the same business bank can also do.
Right.
Why it is that second-hand truck finance is a prerogative of only one or two? Why it is a consumer financing business wherein one NBFC is actually fivefold of multiple banks in India, right? Because theoretically consumer financing में जो एक NBFC सबसे बड़ी हिंदुस्तान की कर सकती है वो बैंक भी कर सकता है.
Right.
See, it is about the DNA and the culture. Banks' business model is very diversified.
Right.
They have to do too many other things as well, right? So they have to serve every segment of the market. They're very broad-based thinking. To serve or solve the problem of credit or for anything, you need very dedicated, organizational culture and DNA.
Right.
So that's why entities like us and few others would end up doing better job than broad-based organization.
Right.
And for one of that reason only, the RBI prescribed for a co-lending in 2020.
Right.
So today, if you look at of the 12 public sector banks in India, a large number of them are actually partnering with us.
Okay.
It is not that they don't have physical infrastructure or they lack capability. It is because they know that we are dedicated towards this. So that's why we can do relatively better job, and that's why they have to partner with us. They have the power of the capital and we have the power of the origination, and it's a good marriage to do.
And automatically the distribution comes in once these two meets. So you spoke about co-lending. So what exactly co-lending is? How does it work? Whose capital is it? How the entire flow of steam works?
Yeah. So I think so. You're seeing the first few years of an explosion of credit happening through a method which was never tried before.
Right.
So हम हिंदुस्तान में when it comes to आप लोग तो बहुत young है, so you don't end up putting money in the fixed deposit of the banks. But generally, when you have to save your money, where you'll go?
Right.
Primarily, you go to the bank.
Bank, right.
So, and why you do that?
Because safety.
And safety is driven from this fact wherein there is a trust associated with a word called bank.
Right.
Because we all presume the banks in India would finally not belly up, right? Because at some or other point of time, the government, the regulator would come in and safeguard you. So, which means that the public trust of giving their money lies with the bank.
Right.
But is that money being well utilized to provide credit to deserving sectors? Right. So that was not happening.
Right.
So that's why regulator prescribed saying that NBFC should be the front end and the bank should be provider of the liquidity. Now, how does this happen? So regulation says, if I have to lend you say 1 crore rupees, 20% of that would go from NBFC and 80% would go from the bank.
Okay.
Right. So the customer would be lend money at a blended rate, say 12%. Okay. NBFC would earn a spread on the 80% while it is earning its on balance sheet income on the 20%.
Right.
But what it is doing, it is safeguarding banks' interest in longer run. Right. Because we have seen episodes where banks have lent large amount of money to NBFCs, big ones, and when they go belly up, then finally the banking institution have to suffer from
Right.
that. Now that risk is avoided because bank is now not lending to an NBFC, it's actually lending to an end customer
Right.
through NBFC.
Right.
Number two, for the NBFCs, actually your ability to expand and generate what we call free cash flow.
Right.
Because if I borrow on my balance sheet and I lend, there is a capacity constraint,
Right.
Because
Correct.
for every borrowing, I have to put capital
Right.
aside and how much I can borrow.
Right.
Now, on my capital, actually, I can go, almost 10x of what otherwise I was
Right.
doing. So I think so. This is a very win-win situation, and as a business, you are generating a lot of free cash flow because
Right.
your fee income is now becoming much bigger
Right.
portion, right?
Plus,
So
you have the reach to the MSMEs, and you'll be the better person to judge whether to lend them or not.
yeah, I think so. No, reach is a misnomer. I don't
Okay.
think so.
Okay.
So because a lot of people say, oh, you have a better reach. We don't have a better reach than in State Bank of
Right.
India or a Bank of Baroda
Right.
or any bank
Right.
in the country, right?
Right.
Or large NBFCs. We have a better method and understanding of the customer.
Right.
So whatever reach we have, we are being able to serve the
Evaluate
need
that.
of the customer,
Right.
right? So reach is not a problem.
Problem.
Banks
Okay.
have much bigger reach.
Right. Correct. In terms of this entire space, how is U Gro doing, and where it is lending the most? What sectors are we looking at, in terms of growth and lending?
So, if you look at, I talked to you about this whole 85 trillion rupees gap, right? So, the registered last census was, I think, 2018, through which we say there are 6.3 crores of MSME in India.
Right.
In actuality, now there will be around 10 to 12 crore of MSME, right?
Okay. All right.
And as Udyam Aadhaar and few of these platforms are coming, you will see more and more registration of MSME happening. But of this gap, where is the largest gap? The largest gap, so you divide the MSME in three parts, right? Unserved, what we
Right.
call new to credit,
Right.
right? Underserved and overserved
Right.
market. The overserved market, we believe, is that any small business which have a turnover range from 25 crore to
True.
200 crore is
Right.
overserved, right?
Right.
Banks, large financial institutions lend to them.
Right.
The underserved or unserved market, we don't do it because we believe that certain vintage of a business is important for availing credit. But this underserved market, what we call define as 25 lakh turnover to 15 crore turnover,
Okay.
which is our target segment, is roughly 95% of the unmet demand.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
So आप एक छोटा सा बिजनेस है 3 साल से चला रहे हैं, आपका एक 10 लाख का लोन आपने लिया था, अब आपको 50 लाख चाहिए to expand and that you are not getting.
Right.
That is the biggest market or biggest need, right?
Right.
So U Gro actually target this customer segment.
And it becomes easier to evaluate also, given that उन्होंने पहले लोन लिया था, उन्होंने
हाँ,
उस पे अच्छा काम
I
किया.
think so. Second, that we design a method of assessment which is predominantly driven by a data set.
Okay.
So we have a machine which has been designed and trained for last 5 years. We look at three primary data: the GST,
Okay.
the banking,
Okay.
and the bureau,
Okay.
and some ancillary information.
Okay.
So for 70,000 plus customers who we would have lent, we have never taken a balance sheet. We have never taken a profit loss statement. We have
Okay.
never taken an income and
Okay.
statement, income tax statement. We only take these three data, and machine within minutes says yes and no to the customer.
Is it the gross score product?
This is the
that you're
gross
talking-
score, yes. And then other challenge is that MSME customer are not same. So two MSME customer are very different type,
Right.
while they might look similar, right? So if I say small chemical industry or small chemical manufacturer and a small chemical trading are chemical businesses, but they are
Right.
not. They are two different
Yes.
businesses. Auto component manufacturer and auto trader are two different business. A dentist and IVF clinic are two different business.
Right.
Lenders are actually fairly uniform when they look at it,
Right.
and that's why we decided to specialize.
Right.
So that's why we only do 9 sector and 100 subsector,
Okay.
so that we understand the customer well. So when the machine has said yes and it moves to a credit officer, he has a defined template
Okay.
of underwriting the customer and say yes and no.
Okay. Got it.
So this is what is the addressable segment, and we serve this addressable segment by what we call the multiple needs of the customer.
Okay.
What are the kind of needs customer can have? Somebody may have a need of a, say, 90-day loan to buy material, which we
Okay.
call supply chain.
Okay.
Somebody may have need to buy a printing packaging machine.
Okay.
Somebody may have a need to expand his
Okay.
office physical
Right.
infrastructure.
Right.
Somebody may have a very short-term working capital need.
requirement.
So, and all of these requirements come from multiple sources.
Right.
So we operate in the band of customer segment from 25 lakh to 15 crore turnover.
Right.
We operate in the band from what we call the yield band of 12% to 18%.
Okay.
And we operate multiple product segments. So we do
Okay.
prime secured loan, prime
Mhm.
unsecured loan,
Okay.
or business loan. We do micro enterprises loan in tier
Right.
2, tier 3 towns. We do machinery financing business. We do rooftop solar. We now do supply chain financing. We also have a platform called GrowX platform, which is take care
Right.
of the daily merchant financing
Right.
need, right? So that is the way we address the universe.
Right.
Because ultimately, when you reach to a very defined size, suppose you have a 1 million customer, then each of these customer have multiple needs which you
Right.
can service.
Right.
तो अगर किसी ने आज हमसे एक प्रिंटिंग पैकेजिंग मशीन खरीदी और हमसे फाइनेंस कराया,
करवाया.
कल उसको जब एक नई फैक्ट्री डालनी होगी, then he will come to us for that
Okay.
need also.
Got it.
So I think so U Gro as an institution is probably fairly unique, where we don't focus on product, we focus on the need,
Right.
and we service through multiple products.
Okay.
So ultimately, we are the premier financial institution to serve all kind of credit
Right.
need for a targeted MSME
This also
customer.
helps you with repeat lending to the same customer.
Yes, of course,
Okay.
of course.
सर जब भी लेंडिंग की बात होती है लोग दो मेट्रिक्स बहुत ऑफनली बात करते हैं बट आई डू नॉट थिंक इट इज़ वेरी अंडरस्टूड वेल सो दोज आर जीएनपीए एंड एनएनपीए सर व्हाट आर दोज मेट्रिक्स हमको कैसे उनको देखना चाहिए हाउ शुड वी इवैल्यूएट दैट
Yeah. So देखिए lending industry, you're right that this is a number which is very
टॉक्ड अबाउट हाइप्ड
talked
अबाउट
about. हाँ, बट एक्चुअली इसमें थोड़ा सा मिथ है. पहले तो जीएनपीए क्या होता है, कोई भी लोन जब वो 90 डेज उसके ड्यू डेट से 90 डेज तक पे नहीं होता तो 91st डे इट बिकम्स ए डिफॉल्ट,
Okay,
राइट, एंड इट्स
alright.
कॉल्ड ग्रॉस नॉन परफॉर्मिंग
Performing
अकाउंट,
asset.
राइट. देन उस लोन में कितना लॉस हो जाएगा, उसका जो प्रोबेबिलिटी होगा, उस पर हमने कितना प्रोविजन कर दिया.
Right.
तो वो मतलब अगर 100 रुपए का हमारा टोटल 90 डे का स्टॉक है और उसमें मैंने 50 रुपए का प्रोविजन कर दिया, मतलब दैट पुटिंग व्हाट लॉस वुड कम टू अवर बैलेंस शीट हैज बीन टेकन केयर बाय प्रोविजनिंग, सो दैट
Right.
बिकम द नेट एनपीए
Right.
or what we call the provision coverage
Okay,
ratio.
got it.
But actually, sometimes GNPA and NPA are not true reflective of how our portfolio will perform in future.
Right.
Because a fast growing organization, because you're growing every year, your denominator is increasing,
Right.
so this percentage would look low, right?
Right.
And that's why when people go deeper, they want to look what we call a static pool,
Right.
and in every cohort of lending, how is portfolio performing? Because it may so happen that 2 years back, my loan given is at a 5% gross NPA,
Right.
but I have lent so much fresh that 5% is on a total aggregate is looking only 1%.
1%,
Right?
right.
So I think a more important factor is what we call the credit cost.
Okay.
Why it is so? Finally, what is their lending as a business? I borrow at 10. I have capital. Then I borrow at say X percentage, say 10%, and I lend at 18%.
Right.
So I have a spread of 8.
Right.
Of that spread, I have a credit cost, which is the loss on the portfolio, say
Right.
2%.
2%. So
I have an OPEX of say around 4 to 5%.
okay.
Right, 4%. So 6%. So which means and then I'm leveraging my balance sheet 4 times. So I have a 4% or 3% spread, which we call net interest margin, right?
NIM. Yes.
And with multiplied with leverage, is that what is a business? Business means any business which can generate return on asset of 3 to 4%,
Right.
and return on equity of north of 15%.
Right.
See, why as an public market or a public investor should invest in a company?
Right.
When for taking that high degree risk from a safe instrument to a risky instrument,
Right.
you go and put your money in FD, you get 5%.
Yeah.
You put money in equity, you should get at least 15% for
Correct.
the risk you are taking.
Right.
So how do you get to 15% is this math, and
Right.
that's why this NNPA is an indicator of what future losses would be,
Alright.
right? But mostly people track it on multiple basis.
Right. So having said this, say for example, when you come to the office in the morning, what are the 3 key metrics that you definitely look at, once you're in office? कि आज मेरे business के ये 3 metrics है, ये मुझे देखने ही देखने हैं.
Look, U Gro has a very, very well entrenched management team, right? I keep saying I'm purely a glorified face for U Gro, but actually this business is run by the management team itself.
Right.
The people underneath me are very vintage, very, very experienced. They are true owners of this company with almost 7.5% of equity. Actually, they look at all the metrics. I
Okay.
hardly look at anything, right?
Oh, that's awesome.
But I think so. What I definitely look at, I always feel that the size of the opportunity and the service which we have to do to our nation is too much, and what
Right.
we are doing is less.
Right.
So I always keep every day morning. When I wake up, I always think that we are doing less and we can do more, and that is always, are we on that path or not,
Okay.
right? Are we getting enough money? Are we getting attracted? Our
Okay.
public investors are liking it? Are we being able to showcase what we are
Right.
doing? Is something which I can
Always
look at
look
a
at.
daily basis and also on a strategic basis.
Right. Given that you're looking at this, the AUM for the company has grown tremendously well in the year 2023. It has, I think, almost doubled. So, what do you think is a sustainable growth rate? So, achieving this number on a year-on-year basis might be a little difficult. But what is a sustainable growth rate for the business that, yes, this particular growth rate can be achieved in the longer run?
Yeah. So look, I think so. In India, I give this example. Bajaj, if I remember correctly, in 2008 was roughly around 8 to 10,000 odd crore,
Right.
right? This should be north of 3 lakh crores now or more.
Yes.
Bajaj over a period of this 23 to 13, 15 years have grown at a pace of 47% CAGR.
Okay.
Right.
AUM.
AUM,
Okay.
right?
All right.
So, so growth in India, why we are an expensive market and why foreign institutional investors and FDI keep coming to us is just because of the
Because of
growth
this.
rate, right?
Right.
Because Japan is at a minus 0.1%
Right.
of negative interest rate. So I don't think the growth is a challenge. Why we have grown? We have grown is I think so. If you look at our journey, this is India's first listed startup.
Right.
Nobody has ever tried this before.
Right.
We acquired a small listed company. We raised straight
Right.
1,000 crore of capital from 4 private equity investors,
Right.
and set the objective of building a large
Right.
institution. It just so happened that we raised our capital in July of 2018.
Right.
Immediately 1 month after that, ILFS happened, then DHFL happened, then Yes Bank
Right.
happened. So obviously the credit market came to a squeeze. We started our business in April of 19. In the first year, we literally deployed our equity capital.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
As it was ending, the COVID came.
Right.
During 1.5 year of COVID, because we had the power of the capital, because our portfolio was fairly resilient,
Right.
we utilized that time to build a massive infrastructure.
Right.
So pre-COVID, we were 120 people. Post-COVID, we were 1,500 people.
Okay. All right.
Pre-COVID, we were 9 locations. Post-COVID, we were roughly around 105 locations.
Okay.
Pre-COVID, our data analytics and technology infrastructure was roughly around 10 people. Post-COVID, it was 275 people.
Right.
Pre-COVID, we had 3 lenders. Post-COVID, we had 60 plus lenders.
Okay.
We had no partnership on co-lending. We had 7 partnership, post-COVID.
Right.
So we built infrastructure, and that infrastructure the journey came to an end at the 2022. And since then, that infrastructure on an incremental basis is generating volume, right? So that's why in 2022 we had 3,000 crore, in 23 at 6,000 odd crore. When we reached 23, then we said that it is our fiduciary responsibility to now deliver the absolute bottom line performance.
Right.
Because while the growth opportunity is very large, but you have to also take a pause. And we capped the OPEX, and then that OPEX is completely delivering the growth. So we are delivering 500 crore per month since April of this year, and that is adding to our AUM.
Right.
Once we reach the next stage, we'll grow from there again.
So a good balance of risk and growth is something that you are aiming at.
Yeah. So growth is now coming naturally to us because I keep saying, if you think of somebody, in BKC, Geo has made a convention center, and it's so large that the first event itself was of lakhs of people.
Right.
So if you build a large house, large convention center, large infrastructure, finally the delivery of that would be larger, right? If you start small, then it will be smaller. So it is now there. Now the next level would happen once we cross about this milestone of reaching a minimum critical size.
Sir, we already spoke about GrowScore to some extent, but there's one more interesting product that you guys are developing, that is GrowX. So please help us understand what kind of product it is and how it is helping MSMEs borrow for the working capital needs at a single tap.
Yeah. So to some extent, GrowScore is also at the heart of GrowX. Let me explain what a GrowScore is.
Yes.
So as I said, that one of the most critical parameter in lending is what we call the repayment capability. This repayment capability historically was very difficult to assess because reported balance sheet number, was never good enough because it was either underballed that you get the repayment, and it also has a lag effect. So today we are sitting in the month of say November, and your March PNL has, for a small business, has no meaning relevance, actually, no relevance. Now when the GST came in and the banking got digitized, we said that this is for the first time, the turnover is a reflection of the size of the business.
Right.
Every business has a defined margin,
Right.
and that turnover reflects into your bank account.
Right.
And the combination of two, your behavior comes out of the bureau footprint of the business.
Right.
So that's why we are in the third generation. So it's a proprietary tool wherein when we take these three data, thousands of parameters get analyzed, and the customer is given a score which is called a band score,
Right.
and machine says yes and no.
Right.
And our fourth generation machine would also say yes, no, how much, what price, what period.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's our overall
Right.
aspiration. So I think so now at least within the lending fraternity, and we showcase the growth score performance, it is fairly well established that this is a method of credit underwriting which is very, very robust.
Right.
Right. Now we apply this across all of our product lines.
Right.
One of the thing in last few years which we have been seeing, and we felt that there is a need to solve for this. When if you live in a society, or if you live in a house, you would have a neighborhood store, right? Your neighborhood store, what's his business? Every day morning there'll be somebody who will come and deliver him 10,000, 15,000, 25,000 rupees of goods. What are those goods are? He will deliver bread, egg, vegetables, multiple kind of things.
And
right?
all these are backed by MSMEs in a way. These are all a
These
part
are
of
the
MSME.
small MSMEs, they're small shops, right?
Yes.
Now, when he's in the morning, when he's buying 15,000 rupees of goods, over whole day or next 2 days, he will sell.
Right.
And then that money would come, and then he can repay. But for that daily need of a merchant or a small shopkeeper,
Right.
there is no credit available,
Right.
right? So what he does, he plead either the supplier to give him the credit,
Right.
or because but most of those will sell him on the cash. He has to then sell it on the credit. कितना अच्छा लगता है जब हम बोलते हैं ना फोन करके अपने हाउसिंग फाइनेंस अपने सोसाइटी के स्टोर को, भाई आप ना ब्रेड और एक लिस्ट लिखा देते हैं,
हाँ.
ये सामान भेज दीजिए. हम उससे कभी ये नहीं पूछते कि इसका पैसा कब देना है, बिकॉज फिर वो पैसा तो आपसे आके बाद में कलेक्ट करता है, बट वो आप उसकी वर्किंग कैपिटल बढ़ा रहे हैं. So ये नीड सॉल्व करने के लिए we said we need a platform.
Right.
So GrowX is a platform wherein it's an app wherein bases certain very elementary data, like your banking statement, your bureau, a limit is loaded on an app, and that limit can be utilized by a small merchant wherein he can draw that money, he can pay money through multiple modes, he can receive money on that and pay us back. So if he has used money for a day, then he is paying interest for 1 day. If he's used money for 5 days, he can. For some reason, if he has used the money and want to now pay in say 12 months, he can convert this into a loan. So this is the technology-driven, completely digital, faceless solution for daily merchant credit.
So because of this, आपका manual intervention भी कम हो गया होगा in
इसमें
lending.
तो zero है actually. इसमें there is no manual intervention.
Okay. Right. Sir, you spoke about the entire DHFL crisis, Yes Bank crisis, which we saw in the past 5 to 6 years. उस दौरान जब U Gro grow हो रहा था, so what were the main challenges, mainly from the perspective of the regulations? Regulations कैसे ये चीज़ों को देख रहा था कि नए player को कैसे help करे, या फिर क्या constraints आ रहे थे आपको?
नहीं देखिए, I think so, but I don't think so. Obviously, there was very sharp tightening of regulation which was done, right? So systematic risk. So I think in India actually it is only a large player which has created systematic problem.
Right.
कभी छोटा ना छोटा business ना छोटा lender कभी ये systematic problem नहीं create करता है, right? क्योंकि हम सबका intent बड़ा अच्छा होता है. So a lot of regulatory changes, scale-based regulation, tightening, the arbitrage between a bank regulation and NBFC regulation were all plugged in. But more importantly, what has happened that prior to a DHFL crisis, and Yes Bank crisis, when it happened first, the credit market completely shut down. So we started with 1,000 crore capital, but all of a sudden it looked like that this is so inefficient. 1,000 crore of capital, but there is nobody to lend to us. Then if nobody is ready to lend to us, then how do we lend further?
Right.
But we had the belief and patience to wait out for that period.
Right.
That's why I said that first year we only literally deployed our equity capital.
Right.
But the positive effect of that multiple regulatory framework came in which are facilitator.
Right.
So for example, the entire co-lending guideline came.
Right.
So co-lending guideline allowed banks to now partner with us and expand the credit. So there is a regulation around direct assignment when we sell the portfolio.
Right.
So earlier it used to be 1 year period for us to wait. Now we can sell it in 6 months time.
Right.
So actually, the crisis created a completely new market,
Right.
a new market, a new method of being able to provide the credit.
Credit. Right.
But I must, so earlier in DHFL, you can take 100 rupees of capital, you can take a 7-time leverage,
Right.
you can have a short-term liability mismatch, but you can generate business through
Right.
that. That is out. So we can only lever our balance sheet 3-4 times, while regulatory we are allowed to do 5 times. But their alternatives are much more prominent, and the future looks
Right.
fairly promising.
Right.
And it is making overall system fairly resilient actually.
So regulators का काम मतलब वो रुकावट कहीं पे भी नहीं बन रहे, they're more of a becoming a facilitator in terms of
See,
increasing.
सबसे बड़ी रुकावट क्या होती है? जब भी बड़ी क्राइसिस होती है ना, तो ऐसे ही सब कुछ ही रुक जाता है.
हाँ.
सो रेगुलेटर का सबसे बड़ा काम है कि कोई बड़ी क्राइसिस
Crisis ना
नहीं
हो.
हो, राइट?
Right.
So regulators are driven by the fact that systematic risk into the entire
Right.
ecosystem should be prevented.
Right.
And even if it temporarily it comes at a sacrifice of certain percentage of growth.
Right.
And I think so our regulator have demonstrated over last 4-5 decades that they do that job fairly well.
Right. एंड हाउ मच ऑफ अ रोल रेगुलेटर्स प्ले? जब कोई क्राइसिस आ जाता है तो रेगुलेटर कैसे उससे निकलवाता है पूरे सिस्टम को?
सो आपने देखा ना हमारे देश में DHFL हुआ, येस बैंक हुआ. सो फाइनली मोस्ट ऑफ दैट क्राइसिस, ILFS हुआ, मोस्ट ऑफ दैट क्राइसिस वाज सॉल्व्ड बाय द रेगुलेटर इटसेल्फ, राइट?
तो तरीका क्या होता है उनका एग्जैक्टली?
मल्टीपल तरीके होते हैं.
Okay.
आई थिंक सो एवरी सो जैसे आप हर फीवर के लिए क्रोसिन नहीं खा सकते,
Right.
हर पेन के लिए सेरेडॉन नहीं खा सकते,
Right.
वैसे ही हर प्रॉब्लम के लिए आप एक दवा नहीं है. तो रेगुलेटर आल्सो अप्लाई मल्टीपल
Right.
प्रिस्क्रिप्शन, राइट?
Right.
So sometimes they do targeted medicine, sometimes do the general medicine, sometimes they do both, right?
Right. Right, makes sense. Sir, lending as a space will definitely grow if India grows, as in the economy grows, the income level grows, so that is where the lending requirement would grow. So आपको कितना बिलीव है इंडिया के नेक्स्ट 20 इयर्स में, कि जो कहा जाता है कि नेक्स्ट 2 डिकेड्स इंडिया के ही होंगे, इंडिया एक बहुत बड़ा प्लेयर बन जाएगा. सो हाउ मच ऑफ अ बिलीवर यू आर इन द इंडियन ग्रोथ स्टोरी?
सिर्फ 2 डिकेड नहीं है, मतलब आई थिंक 2 डिकेड तो हम इसलिए देखते हैं कि शायद दैट्स माय लाइफ स्पैन और शॉर्टर देन दैट. बट आप ऐसे देखिए, हम पिछले 2,500, 2,000, 1,000 साल पहले अगर आप जाए तो वी वर वर्ल्ड्स लार्जेस्ट इकोनॉमी,
True.
राइट? आवर GDP growth rate was highest in the world.
Right.
We were called सोने की चिड़िया.
Right.
But first, so we had successive, but as a country, we were fairly docile, right? That's part of our culture.
Right.
We were never aggressor,
Right.
right? Versus most of the other economies were
Right.
fairly aggressive, right? So what has it has led? It has led to 800 years of Muslim invasion, right?
Right.
And that created disruption, and then 200 years of British,
Right.
right? And then we had a 5 decade of unclear process, right? So
Right.
we first we thought that because we were coming out of we got independence, so we thought that becoming socialist as a country is the right approach.
Right.
That's why we did the constitutional amendment, so we are a socialist republic.
Mm.
But when we said no, capitalism is better, now actually we are getting the grind right. What is grind right? Without exemplary economic growth, we cannot take care of the well-being of our people, right? And that's why economic growth is one of the most prominent reason of our existence.
Right.
And we are getting there.
Right.
It is also coincidental that at the same point of time, see, I think so universe has its own balancing act, right? So people who have taken money from us are now have to give money to us. So I think so we are into that balancing act.
Right.
And that's why I think so that this half century would belong to us, because
Okay.
most of the other places would not have that opportunity what
Right.
we would have.
Right.
आप एक रबर की बॉल को बहुत ज्यादा दबाइए, जितना ज्यादा आप दबाएंगे और जब उसको छोड़ेंगे वो उतना ज्यादा एक्सपैंड करेगी, राइट?
Right.
या किसी बॉल को आप जितने हार्ड थ्रो करेंगे उतना वो वापस
Correct.
आएगी. तो यही हो रहा है, हम इतने दिन इतने तरीके से दबाए गए थे that we are bouncing back. So I am very, very bullish of, and I look at this not in terms of 1 year aberration, 2 year aberration, 5 year aberration, but if you look at longer term horizon, I think so we are in extremely well placed.
Right. So one last question. This is very like something that I wanted to ask. How has your journey been? आप कैसे एक entrepreneur बने? आप कैसे lending space में enter किए? क्या आपका background यहीं से आता है? What is the story like?
Oh, that's a very good question. So, entrepreneurship to me, it was like more of a compulsion than a choice, right? उसका simple reason ये है कि at my point of time, I was born and brought up in Banaras. Both my parents were professors. Both were academician.
Right.
So for us at my time, the only thing which we were told, or we thought, that we have to study very hard and you have to get a good job.
Right.
The definition of a good job was first a government job,
Okay.
then or a bank, or some private sector was even not in
Not in there,
not in
right.
contention. It just so happened that first 10 years after my graduation, post graduation, I spent near to my hometown because I have my only child
Okay.
of my parents. So I was in corporate industry in
Right.
Mirzapur. In 1998, I got, I ran away from home, kind of, because, I felt that if I get married in Mirzapur, then whole my life I have to
Right.
spend between
Right.
Mirzapur and Banaras. And I thought that, no, that I have to do something
Something else.
better for myself. Then I spent 15 years with my previous company. And there, after and first 10 years of that was just a job, whatever I was told,
Right.
I was doing it. And I literally started at
Right.
16,500 rupees of salary there.
Oh,
By incidentally, I became group CEO in 2011.
okay.
And then I realized what is I call the great conflict between the goddess Lakshmi and goddess Saraswati.
Okay.
Right? I keep saying that we in India actually, when it comes to Lakshmi, every one of us in every home and every Deepavali we pray.
Very right.
बट आप में कितने लोग सरस्वती पूजा करते हैं, या कितने लोगों के घर में सरस्वती जी की मूर्ति भी होती है, राइट? नहीं होती ना,
Very less.
हाँ, वेरी लेस. तो ये एक बड़ा ही सीरियस कॉन्फ्लिक्ट है. Versus if you go to in California, if somebody is passing out from Stanford, somebody passing out in MIT, the constraint of not having capital of your own is not a constraint in your mind.
Right.
Because you think क्या है, अगर हमारे पास भगवान ने ज्ञान बुद्धि दी है तो पैसा तो कोई भी दे देगा.
Right.
So this actually I realized in that 5 years of 2011 to 15, wherein I felt that I can create an institution. I spent 15 years of that, but you had a set of capitalists which were their own way.
Right.
And finally, when you fight with them and you try to protect the interest of public, your own people, all of that, then you are literally thrown out from that company where you have spent 15 years.
Right.
So when I was thrown out in end of 2015, beginning of 2016,
Right.
and I came literally on the road. I actually didn't have enough money to even come and stay in a 5-star hotel. I used to stay in small hotels in Bombay. I realized whatever it may be, right, there is no point of serving necessarily to the need of a capitalist, because capital you can drive from multiple.
Right.
But what is the most important thing is to create an institution and leave the legacy of a name.
Correct.
Because money has a very limited use
Right.
at the end of the day.
Right.
But creation of the name is everlasting.
Right.
And foolishly enough, I decided to build U Gro after that.
Sir, you also, since you're talking about Banaras, being your hometown, you also have a picture of, I think, Banaras at the back end. Is Banaras still a very close a place to your heart?
Of course it is. See, I remember, and आपके बॉम्बे में ये बहुत बोला जाता है, right? So आप आज के दिन में आप बॉम्बे में, some of my best, friends or people who I converse, whenever I used to take a cab, right? So अगर आप बॉम्बे में कोई भी कैब लीजिए तो ज़्यादातर लोग आपको या तो बिहार से मिलेंगे या यूपी से मिलेंगे. कोई आजमगढ़, गाजीपुर. एक बार मैं स्टेट बैंक ऑफ इंडिया में गया एंड आई वाज टेलिंग टू वेरी सीनियर कि सर, स्टेट बैंक इंडिया का जो गार्ड है ना, वो मेरा बड़ा अच्छा फ्रेंड है. तो बोले उनका गार्ड आपका कैसे अच्छा फ्रेंड है? मैंने कहा सर, वो आजमगढ़ का है, मैं और बनारस का हूँ. जब मैं उतरता हूँ, बात करता हूँ, तो वो पकड़ लेता है कि मेरी लैंग्वेज या लहजा जो है वो यूपी का है. That's one. Second, I think so. I remember around 10-15 years back, somebody in my previous company was introducing me to somebody who came from US, and he said, "ये शचींद्र नाथ हैं, इनका गांव बनारस है." And I got very irritated. I said, Banaras is considered to be world's oldest city.
Right.
You would also not know. World's first sewage system was established in Banaras, right? It is cultural heritage of the country, and people. So we had actually over a period of this influence of language of English and our colonial culture have dissipated the deep cultural roots of our country. So coming from that place and trying to now compete in this metro cosmopolitan world, I feel very, very privileged and I feel very happy about it. So some of the businesses which we built and why we are growing is because of that heritage.
Right.
Because when you come from a small place, India is not one country.
Right.
It is a combination or culmination of multiple small cultures, right? Across. Right. I was talking to somebody in Sweden actually who was coming to do some project for us, and he said, "Have you ever come to India?" I said, "Yeah, we have come to Nepal." I said, "Nepal का India से क्या लेना देना है?" So I said, "आपको पता है कि सांभर और रसम अलग होता है, एक डोसे में भी मैसूर डोसा और चेन्नई में खाया हुआ जाने वाला डोसा अलग होता है, तो हमारे यहाँ तो कितना ज्यादा
अच्छा difference है,
डाइवर्सिटी है,
right?
राइट? So you cannot even so that to imbibe into business and understand what the real Bharat is come from my cultural
Right.
background. So I'm
So,
really very so,
right.
and thanks to Modi ji, actually Banaras is now at the prominent
Right.
force, so that's also good.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for doing this. We had a great time. I think for us as well, there was a lot of learnings, and especially for the viewers, there'll be a lot to learn.
Yeah.
और कुछ होना हो, but I'm pretty sure कि सरस्वती की फोटो अब शायद लोग अपने घरों में रखने लग जाएंगे.
I hope so.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much.